Hello, my name is Beth Noveck. I'm Director of the White House Open Government Initiative and Deputy United States Chief Technology Officer. I am delighted to be here, at least virtually, to wish you congratulations on this wonderful conference, International Conference on Open Data. And I'm just sorry that I can't be here with you in person, but I wanted to send my regards and that of the White House Open Government Initiative and my colleagues to wish you well for this endeavor, because we are extremely supportive, as you know, of the principles and the practices and the values of open government and open data in particular. On his first day in office, President Obama signed the Memorandum on Transparency and Open Government, in which he outlined that transparency promotes accountability and provides information for citizens about what their government is doing. Information maintained by the federal government, he said, is a national asset, and my administration will take appropriate action consistent with law and policy to disclose information rapidly in forms that the public can readily find and use. This principle of transparency and openness was echoed last week by the President and the Prime Minister of India when they executed the United States-India Partnership on Open Government, and saying that the two great nations of the United States and India share strong democratic foundations as well as an enduring commitment to transparency and innovation as foundations for responsive and accountable government in the 21st century. So as you can hear, our commitment to open government extends both to the domestic and to the international. And in the United Nations in September, the President said, in all parts of the world, we see the promise of innovation to make government more open and accountable. Now, he said, we must build on that progress, and we gather back to here together next year. We should bring specific commitments to promote transparency. So that is why I'm particularly glad that you're having this conference, because we look forward to hearing the outcomes of it at the United Nations in September, when we can hear about the commitments in response to the President's injunction to use transparency to fight corruption, as he said, to energize civic engagement, to leverage new technologies so that we strengthen the foundation of freedom in our own countries while living up to the ideals that can light the world. These are for us not just pronouncements, not just principles. The White House has been leading by example. When we released, for the first time in history, the White House visitor logs, which we do on an ongoing basis, we released the President's and the Vice President's tax returns and the financial information for all senior appointees of the administration, as well as the ethics pledges and ethics waivers. And then we couple this transparent information with the use of social media to open a window, not just a window, to really blow the roof off of the White House and let the American people and the world see what takes place on a day-to-day basis and how we work. You can watch West Wing Week every week. You can follow us on Twitter. You can participate on Facebook. You can ask questions of the President and senior officials on Open for Questions. And this is not just tours of the White House or nice to have sort of touristic things. This is real discussions about policy. You can hear Ben Rhodes from the National Security Council talk about our trip to Asia this week, or Austin Goolsbee on the White House whiteboard explaining complex issues of tax policy. This is a real transparency and making government open to the American people. This principled commitment to transparency, of course, has as its cornerstone open data. It's the hallmark of our domestic policy, as well as now increasingly of foreign policy. Raw data, open and free data, structured data, data that includes text, in other words, documents made available in raw formats, not just statistics, and data that is available for free to all users for any use and reuse, whether it's for journalism, whether it's for research, whether it's for creating a business or doing a book report. We are committed to open government and transparency in practice. To make these principles real, part of our work is to build platforms, because creating open data in practice is hard. The workflow is not in place, where historically we haven't done open data before. Data may be digitized, but there may be no metadata associated with it. It's online, but it's not searchable. There may be one data owner, and if he goes away, no one knows where the data is, or he doesn't want to give up that data. Or the data may be on servers that are so creaky that downloading the data will crash the agency. So making open data happen in practice is not just a matter of political will, it's actually a matter of creating platforms like data.gov, as you have here in the UK, data.gov.uk, and in other countries that are making data transparency real in practice. They're creating a place for people to find data from the government. It's leveraging new technology as our General Services Administration is doing, infrastructure as a service, making servers and cloud-based computing available so that people have a place to put their data so that it can be searched through data.gov. It's creative arrangements like the United States Patent and Trademark Office doing a no-cost deal with Google to host its data so that, again, the creaky servers of the Patent Office wouldn't be overloaded by people trying to download the Patent Office data. And now I'm glad to report that it is an agency that is 100% transparent, both about its performance as well as providing all published patent applications and granted patents. And we are using new tools, brainstorming tools, and public participation tools to engage the public in identifying the highest priority items so that as we do the hard work of moving to open data, we can do so with certain priorities in mind and with the input of the American people. Let me be clear that transparency for the U.S. government is not about transparency for transparency's sake. Simply releasing spending data by itself does not produce innovation or cost savings. Simply releasing calendars or visitors logs or ethics files does not by itself produce accountability. Simply releasing data about transportation or health or safety does not empower citizens. We are guided, in fact, by three principles, not just one. There's a reason it is not just a memorandum on transparency, but in fact a memorandum that the President has outlined the values of transparency, participation, and collaboration, using citizen engagement and using multi-sector partnerships both within government, across levels of government, and with the private sector to use government data to drive better and more efficient performance, improved accountability, as well as citizen empowerment and opportunity. So for us, the partnerships, the participation, and the collaboration is as important to achieving transparency as open data by itself. This is why in the healthcare sector, for example, our Department of Health and Human Services has launched the Community Health Data Initiative and is putting out countless data sets about health and well-being, about obesity, about smoking all across the country. That's why over 15 teams submitted projects that they worked on for 10 weeks at the Community Health Data launch that took place in June 2nd this year, and presented their projects using government data, building projects that were building useful apps that would benefit people in making better decisions about health and well-being. And at that meeting, of course, that then kicked off the partnership with Health 2.0, and in July, 5 more challenges were launched, the winners to which were announced this past October. Again, building tools using government data to improve the quality of health and well-being in America. In the Transportation Department, just to take one other example, the Federal Highway Administration collects information for its Highway Performance Monitoring System. Communities can use this data to benchmark things like traffic volume levels, bridge and roadway conditions against those conditions of communities of similar size or receive similar amounts of federal assistance. They can then determine whether they are growing faster, whether the congestion is on par with other communities, and to develop strategies to improve problems with congestion. This provides perspective when the residents of a community are raising concerns about what needs to be fixed. So again, there are countless examples as we move towards government putting out more data that can lead to greater citizen empowerment. And we are now undergoing the process under the President's memorandum. Pursuant to that, we crafted a directive to all agencies which directed them to create a strategic action plan for transparency that includes the inventory of all high-value information currently available for download in the agency. So those inventories are now leading to the putting out on agency websites and searchable through data.gov of countless data sets that can be used for different purposes. Let me take 1 minute before I close to explain this concept of high-value data, which is defined for us in the Open Government Directive as information that can be used to increase agency accountability and responsiveness, improve public knowledge of the agency and its operations, further the core mission of the agency, create economic opportunity, or respond to need and demand as identified through public consultation. I often get asked, why did we not simply require one kind of data or 3 kinds of data sets? Why not just spending data? Why not just government accountability data of a particular kind? Or why not just corporate compliance data? The reason for having this concept of high-value data is that it has to be all of these things. Open data achieves many different goals, and we're seeing that in practice. When we put out the White House visitor logs, this has the effect of improving government accountability and reducing the possibility for corruption. When our National Archives puts up for download on data.gov the data set of the Federal Register, our daily newspaper of government, and puts it up on data.gov for access, that allows then interested innovators to develop a new version of the Federal Register, so that now we have a Federal Register that looks more like a magazine and less like a legal brief. That open data leads to public sector innovation and improvements in the way that our institutions work. USA Spending, where we put up our contracting data, reduces fraud, waste, and abuse. When the Environmental Protection Agency or the Department of Labor, as they are doing now, put out countless data sets about workplace safety, environmental hazards, and corporate compliance, this leads to greater corporate accountability. When the Department of Education now engages in an initiative with several other agencies, an initiative called the Learning Registry to make learning data available and searchable. This helps to empower citizens to engage in lifelong learning, as we're seeing in other examples like transportation and health. And of course, when agencies like the Patent Office become 100% transparent, this helps people to create jobs and to build businesses in new ways and to promote entrepreneurship. So there is some data that I think we're seeing emerge across the world, spending data and contracting data that everybody is doing. But there's also new kinds of data, whether it's data about grants, whether it's data about transportation or environment, that are leading to or potentially leading to all kinds of new and potentially unexpected and exciting results, like the creation of jobs, like the creation of better functioning institutions. So we have to do both of these things. We have to do the traditional kind of government transparency that is focused on accountability of government, but we also have to release data in order to empower citizens and create better choices. We have to do data that's focused on government and government ethics, but we also have to put out data, because we can, that focuses on achieving better corporate accountability and compliance, better community empowerment, data that's textual as well as statistical. And we have to shift from the old way of obtaining data, which still exists through Freedom of Information Act requests, towards the open government method, which is about partnering with government to proactively release data and use that data to productive ends. It changes also who our audience is. Previously, open data and open government advocates focused on watchdog groups, on journalists, whereas now our partnerships are increasingly with civically minded hackers, with tech folks, and with a whole new range of actors who've never gotten involved in government before. So the most important thing I believe the open data and the open government movement is doing is getting everyone on board, is bringing a much larger array of people under the tent to drive culture change in government, to change the way our public sector institutions work, and to engage citizens in the productive uses of government data to the end of empowering our own communities. Let me close by one word on what we are doing next. We are focusing over the next year, and I think you'll hear more, particularly those of you who were able to attend the Open Data Conference that took place in Washington this week or who watched it online, that we are doing much more with creating open data verticals, if you will, communities around specific areas of data, whether it's health or education or transportation, etc., communities of interest and practice where people are engaging with and using data to productive ends. We are focusing over the next year on the implementation of the Open Government Directive, which means inventorying the data across the agencies and creating these kinds of productive partnerships with people to use that data to the productive ends that I've mentioned. We are very much focused on looking at priorities of releasing data that are going to help communities all across the country, whether it's data focused on corporate accountability, on sustainability and livability, or on consumer choice, prioritizing data that's going to help all Americans improve their quality of life for the better. And finally, I think the last part of our focus is on changing the culture of the way that we create data and use data in the first place. The hope is that by changing the ecosystem and creating a productive and a positive and an energized and civically engaged use of government and open data, that we will ultimately change the way we create information in the first place to make good on the principle of government data as a civic asset, a national asset, and a civic good. With that, I wish you a wonderful conference, and thank you for having me.